ASMR video. Today in this video I decided to make a video for beginners, so I'm basically gonna be walking you guys through how to play chess, how the pieces move, and some of the basic concepts. So yeah, let's jump right into it. This is a useful tool for anyone learning how to play on chess.com. It's called the analysis board, and you can either analyze games or positions or hypotheticals, whatever you want. So yeah, I guess we'll start with the pawn. Yeah, there's a famous quote, I forgot who said it, my bad, but it basically says pawns are the soul of chess, which I wholeheartedly agree with. So, one thing you should know about pawns is that, well, you have 8 of them, as you can see here, and they are probably some of the most important parts of chess. Like, you might not think that as a beginner, because the other pieces, like the queen and the knights and the rooks and the bishops, I don't know, they seem cooler, but the pawns are very important. So, how do pawns move? So pawns can either move forward like so, or on the first move they can move too. So yeah, that's how pawns move. And now pawns can capture diagonally, so they cannot capture this way, but they capture this way. So let's say my opponent plays this, you can take here. So that is how pawns work. Next we're going to probably go over knights. Knights move like this, so they can move here, they can move here. So let's just show some knight moves. Yeah, so let's see, they move like this. You can just kind of move them around. Knights are pretty fun, and what makes them interesting is that they can hop over pieces, so you can let's say I don't know, you can threaten the king, put him in check, even though he's not directly looking at him. His attack goes over the other pieces, which makes knights a really cool piece. Another fun thing about knights is, let's say I just capture this one, but this would probably not happen in a game. Wait, let me just play this out. This is just an example, but let's say your opponent's not really doing anything. You can go here, which is called a fork, because you're attacking the king, and you're attacking the rook. Now, obviously this is not a realistic scenario, but this just kind of illustrates the power of a knight. And one other thing you should know about knights is that they like close positions, which is if you're new to chess, you might not know what that is, but it's basically when there's a lot of pawns and pieces on the board, and there's not many open lines. Whereas bishops, the piece I'm going to talk about next, really like open lines. Alright, so let's talk about the bishops. So bishops, as you can see, are these pieces. They're right next to the king and queen, and they move on diagonals. You can see they move like this. They're pretty cool. They can move on any of the squares, but the thing about bishops, unlike knights, is that they have a specific color complex, or a specific color of squares that they can move on. So here I have the light squared and the dark squared bishop respectively, and no matter what they do, they can never capture each other, and they can never get onto the other color of squares. So yeah, bishops like very open games with not many pieces on the board, and they like really long diagonals, like the more they can see, the better. So you really want to open the game up if you have bishops. And another thing to keep in mind when you have a bishop, let's say you only have one bishop and it's on a light square, you need to remember that you can only attack and defend on the light squares. So this will be important later when you try to strategize while you're playing. Alright, so let's move on to the queen. Now the queen is she is the most powerful piece. She can move in any direction, which is pretty cool. She's omnidirectional, and unlike the king, she can go for any length of squares. So your queen is your most powerful piece, and she'll definitely win and lose you a lot of games, because since she's so powerful, she can be attacked, so your opponent can put a lot of pressure on you and just kind of push her around. Like, obviously these aren't real moves, but you get the idea. And so if you bring her out too early, which is something you shouldn't do as a beginner, you could get punished by your opponent and lose games because of that. Alright, so I think I forgot the rook before the queen, so let's talk about the rook. Now, the rook is a pretty cool piece. It can move basically any direction, just not diagonally. So it can move that way, it can move this way, and it can go any number of squares. And now rooks are they're pretty strong. They're the second strongest piece after the queen. And you might be wondering what this little bar is. This is called the evaluation bar. And basically these numbers are like equivalent to points of material. So one thing you guys should learn is that pawns are worth 1, bishops and knights are worth 3, rooks are worth 5, and the queen is worth 9. So this is a completely made up position, but apparently black is up the equivalent of 1 pawn, even though the material on the board is equal. So yeah, about the final piece, which is the king. Now, the king is, well, definitely your most important piece, and you win the game of chess by checkmating the king. Now, what is checkmate? Checkmate is where you put the king, I'll do a basic checkmate here. This is called the scholar's mate. It's a fun one. Let's say my opponent doesn't really know what they're doing. You can just play this. Oh wait, I think I messed up the scholar's mate. That's my bad, guys. Anyway, let's say my opponent doesn't know what they're doing. You put your queen here, and you checkmate them, which checkmate is basically where you have your opponent in check, and your opponent cannot make any move, which results in me not capturing their king. So whatever piece they move on the next turn, they can't move anything because the game's over, but it's over since they're not able to move anything without me taking their king. So yeah, the king is your most important piece, and you wanna keep him safe at all costs. Now he can move 1 square in any direction, so at the start of the game he's pretty weak, honestly, but as you get into the end game with less and less pieces, he can actually become your most powerful attacker. So keep that in mind. Your king is not just something that sits in a corner and is passive. King activity is actually really important in the end game. So yeah, that summarizes how all the pieces move, and I guess I'm gonna talk through a few basic concepts. Now the first is castling. That's something beginners should learn. So I'm just gonna show an opening I like to play called the Ruy Lopez. You learn about openings later, but let's say let's say they play this, which is the old Steinitz defense. You can just castle here, which doesn't really matter. Like, theory is something that comes later, but basically, if you move your king over here, it castles, so you can see that movement with the rook. And this is very important because it gets your king out of the center, and it keeps him really nice and safe here in the corner. And it also gets your rook over here where it's not doing much, to the center possibly where it can do stuff. You can also do something which is called castling queenside. So, I don't know, I'm not going to do a real opening here, this is just kind of made up, but let's say you just, like, get all your pieces out on the queen side. You can bring your king over here and castle here. So notice your king is 1 over when you castle queenside, and the rook is also over here, so the rook's already on, kind of in the center more. So queenside castling is basically kingside castling, except it's like shifted 1 square to the right, if that makes sense. So yeah, you can do either. It just kind of depends on what position you're playing and what opening you're doing, and basically whatever makes the most sense. So yeah, that's castling. Another important concept for beginners is probably control of the center. So let's say I play this and my opponent plays a very passive opening. Even though no pieces have been traded. The computer really likes this position, and it says I'm up a pawn, basically. Because here I have a really big center, or not there, sorry. I have a big center, you know, like they can capture anywhere here. So these 4 squares are controlled, which makes it very hard for my opponent to develop and play. So yeah, you want to get center control when possible, but you don't always need it. Like, the thing to keep in mind is that all these rules for beginners, like, they're useful and they have their place, but if you watch games between grandmasters, they don't always follow them, but definitely when you're learning the game, you should follow them. Okay, so what's another rule is probably don't move your pieces too much in the opening. So I don't know, let's say for some reason I'm just moving my knight a lot, like, you know, like my opponent's gonna get the chance to develop and just kind of crush me here, like, even though once again material's equal, black's almost up a pawn, and these are just random moves, you know. So you want to try and not move your pieces too much, though once again grandmasters don't always follow this. Like, there was an interesting game in the World Chess Championship a couple of years ago between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen, where they moved their knights like a ridiculous amount of times. I think it was over 20 times in the first. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was a ridiculous amount of times. And it's honestly a really cool game. You guys should check it out. But yeah, that's a little tangent. I think another concept is not bringing your queen out too early. I'm going to show you guys the Scandinavian here. This is one of the lines. Now, this isn't actually bad for black, but let's say for some reason you decided to put your, I don't know where you would put it, but like, I don't know, let's say you put it here. This is just not a good move, because your queen can keep, like, getting pushed around. And, basically, even though your queen is your most powerful piece, that works both ways, so you don't want to have her captured, so try not to bring her out too early. And once again, that isn't always the case, and there's obviously exceptions to these rules, but you just want to, as a rule of thumb, play like that. I'm trying to think any other things a beginner should know. I think the most important thing a beginner should realize is that unless you're like some very special chess genius, you're not gonna be a chess god immediately, and even if you are a chess genius, that will still take a while. So I think a thing you have to do is not tie your chess rating or your chess performance to your intellectual level. There's like not much correlation at all, and if you lose, it's because you're a beginner, not because you're stupid. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And also, just don't get discouraged, you know, like, I lose a lot of games, everyone loses a lot of games, you'll probably lose a lot of games when you start out. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Another thing is just to play and have fun. Like, chess is often seen as kind of a serious game and, you know, an intellectual battle or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's just a game like anything else, so seeing it like that is oftentimes helpful, and if you have fun, it helps you, like, sustain your effort and your interest in the game, and it'll ultimately make you a better player because of that. So yeah, this was just a quick video on things beginners should know in chess, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.